So I'd like to start by asking Stephanie Vandermeulen to tell us about her pathway to board service.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, you know, about a decade ago or so, when I first started into PA education, I spent really the first couple of years of PA education kind of trying to make that, I think, inevitable transition that most people make from clinical practice into education on that learning curve that everyone is on for that first couple of years. And I think once I got my feet underneath me, I really started to look for opportunities to get involved in one of the national organizations, just to kind of give back to the profession a little bit. And yeah, I looked at some of the other professional organizations, and PAEA just seemed like a natural fit. As an educator, it seemed like a logical place to put my efforts. And I loved the collaborative, just family-like feel of PAEA. So it really felt like the natural fit for me. And so I tried a couple of times to get onto a committee, which at that time they weren't councils, they were committees. And it was unsuccessfully the first couple of times. But, you know, truly, I think as a brand new educator, I might have been barking up the wrong trees a little bit. And so rather than just getting frustrated, I decided to seek some input. So I contacted the staff at PAEA and said, okay, what can I do to increase my chances? And they were lovely, and they gave me lots of feedback and maybe helped me refocus where my talents and skills might have been a little bit maybe more applicable. And so I applied for a council, which at that time was known as Nominations and Awards, and which is now actually two separate councils, but at the time it was a combined council. And I was successfully got onto that council and spent the first year, and I was so thrilled with how welcoming everyone on that committee was to me. They just kind of took me in, and right away I felt like my opinion mattered. You know, it wasn't just sort of, oh yeah, she's the newbie, she's the new girl, she can't possibly have anything to contribute. I really felt like my opinion was valued right away. And even though maybe I didn't have some of the same skill sets as the folks on that council, I really had other skill sets that I felt were valued as well. And so the next year, those two councils split into separate ones, and they asked me to chair the awards committee. And again, that was just another opportunity to stretch myself a little bit more as a council chair rather than just a council member, and kind of take that leadership position. And I enjoyed it a lot. It felt like just a natural next step for me. So I had a number of people just through that process as I got to know more people and get involved in PAEA a little more deeply. I just had a number of people say to me, well, when are you going to run for the board? When are you going to run for the board? And that was a little scary for me, but at the same time, I felt like it was empowering too. It was like, well, there must be some people that see some things in me that make them think that I would be, you know, a contributing member and a valuable member to the board. And you know, I don't know that anyone ever deep down really believes that they're ready. I did a piece recently for the Networker that I think talks about that a little bit. Is, you know, I equate it to when you decide to, if you have children, when you decide to have children, you know, if you waited until you were quote unquote ready to have children, you'd never have children. And I think that the same can kind of be said for that leap of faith to run for the board. I think you just have to decide, no, you know what, I have the skills and I have the desire, and this is something that I have a natural urge to do, and others have clearly seen something in me because maybe they've said, hey, have you thought about running for the board? And I did, and I got onto the board as the director at large, and it has been truly the best professional move and frankly personal move too, because I've made great relationships and great friends through this process, and I have stretched myself and learned so much, and it's been just an exceptional professional development opportunity and something that I will always cherish, and has changed me in many ways, both personally and professionally.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I wonder if there are any questions specific to Stephanie's story. If you have a question, you can type it in or ask to be unmuted.
I don't know.
I don't see any. Do we have anybody asking to be unmuted?
Yeah, hold on, we're working on that right now. Sorry about that. You should now be unmuted.
Hi, it's Danielle Kempton. How are you?
I'm good,
Great,
Danielle. How are
Danielle.
you?
How are you?
I'm great. Stephanie, I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to how you balance the responsibilities being on the board of directors and the director at large position with your responsibilities at home and your responsibilities in the program and so on.
Yeah, it is a balancing act. I won't lie. Because it's some extra time and definitely some commitment to PAEA, and I think it has to be a commitment. I think once you make that commitment to be on the board, you do also have to acknowledge that these are important commitments, and sometimes it does mean rearranging a few things back at the home program to be able to make those board calls and things like that. And so while I think PAEA, both the volunteers and the staff are exceptionally understanding of knowing that, we all have day jobs, and those are the ones that actually pay our salary and pay our mortgage, and they certainly don't expect you to drop everything. I think that there is a bit of a balancing act of understanding that you've also made a commitment to PAEA too. I've been really fortunate in that my institution and the leadership here and particularly my coworkers have been incredibly supportive of this. They understand that it's not only just a benefit, to me personally, but it's a benefit to our program too. To have someone from the program in a leadership position, that pays dividends back to the program as well. And but it was something that I had a conversation with all of my coworkers before I ran for the board, and particularly before I ran for president of the board, and said, hey, I'm going to be doing this, but there are going to be some things that maybe my responsibilities will have to be shared in some ways, and I need to know that this is something that's supported, and I'll try to pay back in any way that I can, but I may need some support sometimes. So I think I was really open with people right away that that I recognized that I may need some help and some support at times, and so I think that was really appreciated. But I want to underscore that the folks at PAEA staff absolutely understands that we have jobs back at home, we have families, and they do everything that they can to try to help you maintain that balance. And so, I think does that maybe try to answer that question?
Oh, I just learned I can unmute myself. Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate your insight.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great, thank you. So any other questions for Stephanie at this time? Okay, hearing none, Stephanie, I have one additional question for you, if you don't mind. You discussed the benefits that it brings to your program, and I thought it might be helpful to just share a couple of the things that you've noticed over the years that have, things maybe you've learned at PAEA in the board role that you've maybe implemented at the program or other aspects.
Yeah, I think that it really gives you such a broader perspective of not only what's going on across PA education. You get insight into just different things that other programs are doing from a curriculum perspective. Just kind of curricular innovations, other things. You understand some of the challenges that other institutions or other programs are maybe facing within their institutions and how they've managed those. And so I think a lot of that, just kind of insider information to some of that, has been really helpful to be able to bring that back. And I really think that because you're operating on a level where you're having a lot of interaction with organizations like the AAMC, and you're doing a lot of policy work and things, you really, I think, are interconnected into the healthcare landscape in a different way. And I think that it deepens your understanding of really, once we graduate our students, the environment that they're going into, and it helps you kind of see around that corner a little bit and say, okay, well, how can we at the education level, how can we better prepare our students for what we know is coming? And so I think really being able to get up to that 30,000-foot view and understanding not only education, but how education and our graduates interdigitate into the workplace, it really gives you just a much different perspective on how to better prepare PAs. So I think those are a couple of real natural benefits that I think my program has had from having someone in a leadership position.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other questions for Stephanie before we move on? Okay, at this point then, let's continue. I would like to show you a few resources that are available to you The 2016 Board of Directors roster is available on the PAEA website. There you can see each member, what their position is, and their contact information. And I know that board members always appreciate the opportunity to talk to some of our members about the benefits of being involved in leadership. And we would encourage you, if you have an interest in more information after today's call, that you reach out to any of the board members and seek their input as well. The 2017 call for board positions is also available on the PAEA website. And this year, the association is seeking the following positions: President-elect, a secretary, and 3 directors at large positions. And so you can see before you the call for board members page. And at this page, you should be able to learn more information about each of those positions, the deadlines, the process, things of that. You also see the responsibilities and time commitments. You'll see that the candidates are required to submit written responses to membership questions that will be included in their campaign information that is posted on the website. Now, in the past, candidates were required to answer attendee questions while on stage at the first business meeting. But acknowledging that this may have created a lot of stress and barriers for future candidates, the candidate engagement at the forum has now changed. So a candidate session will be held in a separate room on Friday morning of the forum. Attendees will be able to ask board candidates questions in a small group setting and possibly listen to responses that may be posed by others. And any questions that you have regarding this session or other candidate expectations can be directed to Jennifer Jarman, who is our LDRC staff advisor and chief operating officer, and she introduced herself at the beginning of this call. Are there any questions at this time? Okay, well, in the absence of questions, the LDRC panelists have prepared questions that are frequently asked by board candidates. And so I'm going to turn the first question over to Mona Cedric.
Thanks, Kevin. Janie, can you tell us a little bit about the time commitment that a board member, specifically a director at large member, I think that's going to be interesting to our participants.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mona. Typically, board members, especially directors at large, and all board members, attend a quarterly board meeting, typically 3 days in length. The meetings are usually held at the PAEA National Office. We do have one meeting that's held at a remote location, and then we have one meeting at the Education Forum each year. So we may be asked to travel as a representative of the association to different conferences and occasional travel to the National Office for Planning and Advocacy purposes. So that's always a possibility. And usually directors at large are also assigned to serve either on a work group or a task force. And if this group has been approved for an in-person meeting, then we also are expected to travel and attend that meeting. Those meetings typically are held at the national office in D.C. and scheduled with respect to the board and the other task force members' calendars. As an example, I can tell you that I am on the Student Advisory Task Force for this year, which has been just such a treat for me because I work with the students in my program, but it allows me to work with students from all over the country to be an advocate for the students who are interested in being PA educators, which I think is so important. And we're working with those. We're creating the Future Educator Fellowships, and so I'm working with all these students on the Student Advisory Task Force to help them as they develop this Future Educator Fellowship and a Future Educator newsletter that we're working on. So there's lots of excitement going on in that particular perspective. The only thing I would comment on as far as board membership is there is a time commitment, obviously, outside of just attending the meetings. I think it's very important to realize that there is preparation for the meetings, and we are typically sent the information for our meetings about a week ahead of time, usually, once they have all of the information together, and we're sent that information and we are asked to review it so that we can speak intelligently about that and ask questions and carry on a discussion about those, about all of the different perspectives of the meeting. So it's very helpful to be prepared, and I would just say you should probably plan to not only attend the meetings, but feel that you have time to set aside to attend to looking at the agenda and doing maybe a little bit of your own personal thought processes just to come up with how you feel about particular topics, and so you can be a great contributor to the conversation as well. So, you know, I can't say enough good things about the experiences I've had on the board and the impact that I feel like I've had. So I would certainly encourage you to consider doing that.
Thanks, Janie. And I think the next question is going to be asked by Stephanie. Okay, well, Bill, I'll ask you the next question then. Bill,
sorry, no, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, I have two places to mute myself, and I had managed to mute myself in both of them. Sorry about that. I'm sure a lot of people probably wish they could mute me on a lot of different occasions.
That's not true.
Yeah, so the question I'd like to pose to Bill, thanks Mona for being willing to jump in there in my absence. One of the things that I think people, when they're considering a run for the board, and sometimes they wonder about is, you know, am I prepared? How can I possibly get up to speed on all the things that PAE is doing? And, you know, I'm just worried that I don't know enough to be a board member. Can you talk about that a little bit and let us know what you think level of preparation, what the importance is of level of preparation?
Sure. Hopefully I'm not muted. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay, good. So first of all, thank you to all the participants who have shown an interest in PAEA and possibly getting involved in board leadership. I think this is fantastic. So certainly when one looks at the work of the PAEA board, the good thing is we're handling lots and lots of interesting topics, some of them that have, you know, span a few years. And I think it is a reasonable question to say, well, geez, how can I come into the middle of that and make sure that I'm going to be effective? And I've been very impressed over, particularly the past 2 years, when, because the board expanded, we really had a lot of new people coming onto the board. And I've been impressed with the effectiveness of the things that we do have in place. First of all, probably 4 or 5 years ago, the first iteration of a really comprehensive half-day board orientation began. It's been improved every year after that. And as I talk to the new members of the board, they really do feel both prepared in regards to how the organization does its work, as well as some background on some of the key issues that we're considering. That comprehensive orientation for new board members that occurs before the January board meeting, before you ever first take office, is accompanied by a comprehensive board handbook. And the nice part about the board handbook is it's electronic. It has nice, easy links that you can that get you quickly to the information you need. You're not just sort of blindly leafing through it. There's an effective table of contents for that. What I've been most pleased with, that I think has helped both new board members and you know, the continuing on board members, is the staff's commitment to creating summary and background documents for each agenda item that we cover. So it talks a little bit about the history of the topic, talking about where we were when the last time, you know, what was the state of that topic the last time we considered it, when was it first considered, what kind of decisions have been made along the way, what kinds of parts of the organization are working on it, what are the recommendations. They often provide, coming from the councils or the staff, 2 or 3 courses of action that are a possibility, with some real thought out pros and cons of each. And those come to you far enough in advance of the meeting, typically at least 10 days in advance, so that you have plenty of prep time and you're not blindly just trying to figure things out. The other thing that we did last year, which I found very effective, based on the feedback that I've heard from new board members, is we instituted a mentor system so that each new board member has a choice of identifying an existing a continuing board member that they would like to pair with in that role. And I think that that's, they get to pick. It's not assigned to them. We make sure that everybody has a person. If they don't, have a particular preference, it can be assigned if they want. But each one of the new board members last year picked somebody, and I think that's an effective thing. So, certainly it is a concern. How would I catch up? How would I know how would I frame the issues? But there are plenty of resources that I think, as I've watched new board members in the past year, are very effective at bringing people up to speed and allowing people to contribute at the highest level at board meetings. And although there is a learning curve, people very shortly are up to speed and getting involved. So a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Stephanie, I'd like to ask if you could take this one on for us. I think people are curious about how you develop as a board member and how PAEA supports your development activities.
Yeah, I think that for me personally, one of the biggest benefits from board service, aside just from the personal satisfaction of, just what you're giving back to the profession, has been really the professional development that I personally have gotten. And it happens, I think, just in a number of ways. As I said before, I think that just the being able to interact with people on the national level, and folks from the other the three organizations of the 4 orgs, AAPA, NCCPA, and the ARCPA, just thinking about things more strategically among the other professional organizations, and really thinking about the profession in a different way, as well as some of our external partners like the AAMC and other organizations. I think that really allows you to kind of develop the ability to go into meetings like that with confidence. But I think probably more consistently, one of the things that happens is that from time to time, and I would say pretty frequently at almost every meeting that I can really recall in the past several years, consultants or thought leaders are brought in. Every time the board meets, they bring in some people that are leaders in their field or consultants around specific areas to really work with the board on a variety of topics to expand the board's knowledge and expertise, either in different areas or in leadership development. And so it's been a constant learning opportunity for us. Recently, the board has been doing some work around governance as leadership. A woman named Kathy Trower, who has written a couple of books on this, and really looking at upping the game, I think, on the way the board functions, and changing the way that the board approaches their work, and prioritizing the types of thinking modes, when we work together at our meetings. Not only doing some of the operational things that a board is responsible for, the fiduciary responsibilities, things like budgets and that, but really starting to think much more generatively and more strategically about the direction of our profession and of the organization. And so, our ability to approach that work in a much more systematic way, and thinking about things in a different way has I think paid off in dividends in some of the decision making that the board has done. And so, I think that those opportunities to bring in people can give us training in leadership development in ways that we, that you maybe otherwise in your individual institution wouldn't have had an opportunity or access to. Some of those people, I think, have been just incredible opportunities for personal growth and development.
Stephanie, this is Timmy. Could I add a couple of things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things that we've really been cognizant of is once you hit the board, you're not representing your own program anymore. And so one of the things that bringing in different people from the outside has done is allow people to get out of their local frame of reference, because, as you know, we're representing now over 200 programs, and to think about things from different perspectives coming that maybe you wouldn't naturally do. And as a matter of fact, a few years ago, we brought in a consultant who did some assessments with the board about how they work and what their preferences were at work. And one of the overwhelming kind of enlightenment for the board was that he said, you know, you have to be careful because as educators and PAs, you're kind of geared toward a certain thought process. And so as an organization, you need to attend to that to make sure that there's diversity of thought. And that doesn't just mean about racial and ethnic issues, but about perspectives. And so he said, you know, as you move forward and you continue to develop the board, pay attention to that issue because, again, you have a very wide constituency to represent. And I think that that's been on the forefront of our thoughts for a while, especially because he was pretty direct in those comments that we have to get our leadership thinking not just about what's happening at the, nationally, but also how to gain the perspective of every member who's not sitting at the board table.
Thank you very much, Timmy. And just for those of you who have not had the opportunity to meet Timmy, now that she's able to make the call, this is Timmy Agar-Barwick, our CEO for PAEA. She's been with the organization for at least 20 years now, right, Timmy?
25 this year.
Yeah.
Next year. Yeah.
And so thank you for joining us, Timmy. I'm glad you could make it. And our next question actually is going to be for Michael Stadler. Michael, the board candidates have expressed concerns about paying for travel when their programs struggle supporting faculty for other engagements. Could you maybe talk about all the travel arrangements and how that works for you as a director at large, please?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin. The short answer to that question is PAEA staff take care of everything. The somewhat longer answer to that question is that PAEA is going to cover all of your expenses. That includes your hotel reservations, it includes your travel, it also includes the meals that you have while you're at the meeting. If there are other expenses that are incurred in conjunction with your travel, for example, paying for parking at the airport, there's a process in place where we can submit for reimbursement. So like I said, basically everything related to any of the travel that we do for the board or even a task force meeting would be covered by PAEA. One thing that PAEA also provides is going to be a credit card for each board member. And so if there are incidental costs like paying for a taxi or a shuttle to get you from the airport to your destination, then that is going to be covered as well. Well-defined process for submitting for your reimbursement, but basically look for all of your expenses related to travel to be covered.
Thank you. We were able to bring Shalyn Bucks, who's here today from the University of Florida. She was able to make it, so I just want to thank Shalyn for joining us, and she's going to ask the next question.
Hi, thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this question is for Bill. Bill, it's hard enough to keep up with information at work and at home. Can you tell us what tools are in place to help keep up with the board work?
Yeah, as I said earlier, hi Sean, welcome. As I said earlier, some of the, there are a variety of topics that we're working on. For me, one of the things that seemed to work for me was to use a different email for a PAEA than I use for all my other stuff, so that I can keep track of that. So that was one strategy that works for me. But the strategy that really works for the organization is that there is, instead of getting email after email after email about things that you should think about, there's one place there called Basecamp that's a piece of software that all board members are, depending on your role, whether it's the board or you're on a council or whatever, you're assigned to a section of Basecamp, and all the materials for the board or that council are put in Basecamp in folders. It generates, once a folder is put in there, it generates an email to the parties that are participants in that folder saying something's been added. You can either click on then or know to go back later. And it's really nicely organized. It's a project management website, and it really, for me, works really nicely to go back and find documents. I've always said that I have a great filing system. My retrieval system is rather spotty at times. So I can always retrieve things from Basecamp because it's put there in a nice, organized way. And then the other is, I found that the PAEA staff, as was mentioned earlier, is very understanding of our dual commitment to our full-time jobs, as Stephanie mentioned, the ones that pays the bills, and then our volunteer commitment to the association. And this commitment is one you need to take seriously. It's one that you want to be successful at, but staff realizes that on occasion you might get distracted, might miss a deadline, and they're very good about paying attention to that stuff and giving you a gentle reminder to say, Bill, you may have not, recalled seeing the survey from the most recent board meeting, but I see that you haven't filled that out. Could you, make sure to get that done? So, the deadlines are clear. The Basecamp helps to save those pieces of information, and the staff helps to put Band-Aids on to keep things going if you happen to overlook them. So I think the systems are in place to manage that information. But it's a good question.
Thank you very much, Bill. Mona, I wonder if you could maybe take this next question, which is basically, we'd like to know how the candidates know the topics of the platform questions. Are there typical areas that these questions will focus on?
Thanks, Kevin. So the questions differ from year to year, and they're mainly based on current priorities of the association and generally PA education. They could be current discussion areas that the board may be engaging in, or the membership that has expressed an interest in, and they're generally topics that most people would be familiar with, especially in PA education. They could be some concerns that are listed on the listserv and or leadership discussions. They are thought-provoking questions, but certainly very common questions that you would anticipate in our field.
Thank you very much. We do have a couple questions that have come in, so I'd like to tackle that and appreciate those questions coming in. The first question is someone out there is wondering what kind of committees and task forces the director at large is required to participate in. And in general, that, at least from my experience serving on the board for 7 years and talking to our current board members, it really depends on some of the hot topics that are coming up that the board feels the need to explore. So often those assignments are at the discretion of the PAEA president and are typically done in conjunction with the director at large's background and experience, or are also in terms of ways to help strengthen their future development as a board member as well. And so that can be largely dependent on some of the new things that are coming up that want to be explored from the organization's perspective, or sometimes other organizations may decide to set up a summit or ask for representation at a particular event that a director at large can be assigned to. Another question that came in was how difficult is it to convince your institution to provide you time to perform your duties, like vacation time, how is that handled, how are teaching loads managed, etc. From my experience, it seems that the institutions have a lot to gain from your participation, as Stephanie had alluded to and Bill previously. There is a great opportunity for your program's own growth and development from what you're learning as a leader of the national organization. You are often participating in discussions about topics that may be coming down the pipeline. One example would be entrustable professional activities, which has been coming down the pipeline through the PA world in Europe and also through the AAMC with medical schools. And that was a topic of conversation that we were sent to cover several years ago. And so it just helps us as an organization prepare, but also trickles down to your program. in my experience, the best thing you can do is have an honest, transparent conversation with your deans and directors and chairs about the benefits and the challenges that could come from that. And often they'll work with you, as Stephanie had talked about with her colleagues, to mitigate those challenges. So we have another question prepared here, which is for Stephanie. It's a very important topic, Stephanie. I wonder if you could maybe touch a little bit about the challenges of conflict of interest for board members and how disclosures can be managed. And my guess is we're going through the double unmuting process. So I'll give her just another second here.
Yes, we're going through the double unmuting process. Thanks for the acknowledgement. You know, one of the things that Timmy mentioned earlier that I think is a really key critical piece is that you know, when you come onto the board, you're no longer a representative of your own program. You're a representative of the association, and so it's really important to understand that there can be both real and even perceived conflicts of interest with some of the other activities that you may be involved in. And so all board candidates, when they declare their candidacy, are required to disclose any perceived areas of conflict. And so, you know, you really have to just kind of think critically about what are all the activities that I'm involved in. And I think when in doubt, it's best to just disclose, you know, as much as possible, more rather than less, whether it is a conflict of interest or not. I think it's just good idea to kind of be forthcoming about everything that you're involved in. And then, you know, these positions, if you're, you know, for example, if you're on hold a position on a national board that's related to PA education or, you know, other national service, then those have to be evaluated. And so, you know, the difficult thing I think about conflict of interest and, you know, these sorts of issues is it's not terribly, you know, there are obvious conflicts of interest, but sometimes when it gets into maybe perhaps perceived conflict of interest, it's sometimes that can get a little bit cloudy. And so I think it's always best to just have those conversations and to determine whether or not a conflict exists. And so just a couple of examples. So say, for example, you're a faculty member of a PA program, and one of your scholarly tasks is to develop test questions for students after they've completed a clinical rotation. If you have been asked to join an assessment council committee to write questions for PAEA projects, you know, would that be a conflict of interest? And that's not necessarily an unmanageable conflict of interest. So that's, I think, the other important piece to understand too, is that sometimes you may have a conflict that can be managed. So not all conflicts are going to just completely knock you out of the running, and, you know, without questions asked. I think it's something that would be explored on a case-by-case basis. And so that example that I gave, you know, you would declare that on the annual agreement form, but that's a conflict that could likely be managed. Another scenario that you might think about is if you've been asked to become a PAEA council chair and you're presently a member of a similar council in your state PA chapter, you know, is that a conflict of interest? And in most cases, that's not. Sometimes that can actually be an asset because you've got some experience in that area, and it wouldn't be perceived as a conflict of interest. However, again, it's always best to just be more forthcoming with those activities. If you think there's any question that maybe someone may perceive it as a conflict of interest, it's best to just have that conversation up front and say, is it a conflict? And if it is a conflict, can it be managed within my board service? You know, if there are any questions, that's one of the big roles of the Ethics Council. That will go towards the Ethics Council, and they'll review any perceived conflicts of interest. And then they'll work with the LDRC to determine if those are manageable conflicts of interest or not. So any questions on that can be directed. If you have further questions about, you know, whether or not maybe some of your professional activities or personal activities might be perceived as a conflict of interest, that's something that Jennifer can help you with. Jennifer Jarman can help you with.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I just want to direct your attention, if you haven't seen it yet, the board candidate deadline slide is up on the screen. And so the material submission deadline is May 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And then there will be a process between that date and June 29th when the board candidate's eligibility will be reviewed by the LDRC, and then you'll be notified of eligibility by that date, June 29th. Then you'll have almost a month to submit supplemental materials, and then the election will actually take place on October 15th. The staff work with you, as Bill alluded to. They'll work with you if there are any questions or concerns about the materials. We want to make this process as easy for you as we can, while still providing our members with ample information about your interest in candidacy for the board. And so the staff are there to assist you, as are the members of the LDRC and the board of directors who are on the original page that we showed you with the board roster. So at this time, I'd like to just ask if there are any additional questions from the audience that we might take for you. I'm going to give it just a minute to make sure the staff have had a chance to look for unmuting requests.
We see no requests at this time and no questions from the participants.
Okay, well, I want to draw your attention to our last slide, which is the contact information for Jennifer Jarman. I can't tell you how much we appreciate your interest in the potential for running for a board position. We just want to encourage you in the process, and again, just reiterate how we're here to support you in any way we can. We look forward to your questions and your future submission materials. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen to the call today. And I want to thank the members of our panel and our guests for their participation as well. We wish you the very best. Have a great week.